Oakley Hill spent most of his life in Albania, leaving us a record in his book, An Englishman in Albania, published in 2002. His son, David, reports as follows. My father, Darrell Reed Oakley Hill, inherited his forenames from two fascinating families. He was deputy to General Percy, who with a team of British officers ran the Albanian Gendarmerie, police, from 1929 to 1938. The British withdrew in October 1938. Oakley Hill was Inspector General of the Gendarmerie for the last 3 years and interpreter for King Zog. As Secretary of the Anglo-Albanian Association, he helped Albanian refugees who had escaped the communist regime of Enver Hoxha to England with jobs and housing. On the map, Albania lies, symbolically, beneath the heel of Italy. She now lies crushed under that heel. The dictator's delightful technique is to pick someone smaller, much smaller, than yourself, knock him down, and as you trample on him, yell insults at him to justify your agreeable action. Mussolini has let it be known that he could not permit a permanent state of disorder to exist across the Adriatic, and he therefore decided to take over defenseless little Albania. What is the truth? There was no disorder in Albania. King Zog had seen to that, and he had been helped by his people. Contrary to the general belief, the Albanians are a peace-loving and most tractable people, until you touch their honor or their freedom. Then they can become ferocious. But all they want is to be left alone, to live their own lives, and work out their own destiny. I was talking to an Albanian friend the day before Italy's invasion. We knew it was coming, though we could not foresee the brutal suddenness of it. He did not believe that Zog would yield and become a puppet. Let us fight and die, he said, so long as we come out of it with honor. That sums up the attitude of every Albanian. Zog did not let them down. Zog is a born leader. I have always admired him, since I was first presented to him in his summer pavilion on Durazzo's beach 10 years ago. A soldier king, tall and upright, with a broad forehead and deep-thinking eyes. He looks a soldier and a statesman. Since then I have met him countless times. I used to accompany my chief, General Sir Jocelyn Percy, as his staff officer and interpreter, on his regular visits to the king, to discuss gendarmerie matters. The king often asked my opinions on other matters, too, such as social and political affairs. I remember distinctly how he said, "You British are right. There will be no real peace in Europe until England had crushed her enemies." When he first came to the top at the end of 1924, Zog saw that the state of unrest left by the war must be ended, as only in an atmosphere of law and order could Albania's newfound independence be developed. It must be remembered that this independence was not won until 1912, after 400 years of Turkish domination, and it was only in 1920, after the country had been cleared of foreign troops, that the Albanians were able to set to work in earnest as a free people. So King Zog, then president, brought in British officers to organize his gendarmerie. Later General Percy took over, and I was one of a group who joined him in 1923. We found the material excellent, and in General Percy's hands, it grew into a fine force. It was the old story. Straightforward British methods of administration and justice created an atmosphere of confidence in which the men felt secure. The gendarmerie became a team and worked together happily together. Brigands, strong in the old tradition, were caught, and cold-blooded murderers brought to justice. In this soil, the tree of civilization began to grow and spread its branches. Tourist trade, law, banks, schools, art, sport, and the press all flourished as in other civilized countries. Tourists began to arrive and went away enraptured by the wild loveliness of the mountains. The Albanians founded a touring club. I was on the council, and we worked to draw tourists to see Europe's latest beauty spot. They came first in hundreds and then in thousands. It was fascinating to be there and watch the growth of this hardy young state. Everywhere, in the mountains, in the town cafes, people talked together of their country and their freedom, and what they would do with it. Their land was infinitely precious to them, and they meant to own it. Now the dark invaders have come, and the dream is ended. We British officers were stationed in various centers: Scutari, Korçë, Elbasan, Durazzo, Vlorna. I was most of the time at Tirana with my chief. We used to make frequent tours of inspection, visiting the little gendarmerie posts, which were scattered all over the land, a land consisting mostly of mountains. We would hire 2 or 3 pack ponies, take our ordnance orderly, and set out. There is hardly a yard of the country that is not sacred ground for some chieftain, but sometimes we would accept hospitality and stay in a private house. It was that way I realized the meaning of Albanian hospitality. The people of the mountains are dreadfully poor except the few local chieftains, and they are not rich, but all are friendly, charming, and hospitable. Everything they have is at their guest's disposal. The poorest will ply him with bread, coffee, milk, a sheep or chicken, yet rise with no preparation of savory dishes without the least thought of the intruder into his meager store. The honor of the house is at stake. Lavish hospitality. The chieftains are most lavish, within their means. I stayed once with John Marcagioni, the hereditary chief of the Merdita tribe. He has built himself a strong house on a bluff halfway up a 5,000-foot mountain, and there he holds sway. His men take the sheep and goats up to the higher pastures early in the morning, and in the evening they file slowly down again. The sheep and goats are led into pens, and the milking begins. The women of the household are responsible for the dairy, where cheese and yogurt are made. Inside, we sit around the great hall with the chieftain, talking and drinking little glasses of raki, the homemade spirit, while outside, the stillness of the mountains is broken only by the barking of sheepdogs or sudden shots fired by the watchmen at lurking wolves. All along the mountain slopes are dotted the little houses of the Highlanders. Every man, according to his ability, has his flock of sheep and goats, works his little patch of land, and lives in a country bound to itself by traditions handed down through centuries. All along the mountain slopes are dotted the little houses of the Highlanders. Every man, according to his ability, has his flock of sheep and goats, works his little patch of land, and lives in a country bound to itself by traditions handed down through centuries. Men and women are bound by ties of family and clan, and by traditions which have come down from the dawn of time. Food, free to all, is gathered from the land, and the traditions of the past are the spirit and the soul of the earth. Spirit still lives. King Zog knows now that he was wrong to put his trust in Mussolini. But no one can honestly accuse him of betraying Albania. For years he fought to lead an Albanian army, worthy of the name, equipped with modern arms. But Mussolini could not allow that. Mussolini has not played entirely fair with his so-called friend, King Zog. Even the Highlanders of Sanjak and Merdita, whom I have heard from friends still living in the mountains, have not been disarmed. There are still many seized rifles and edged weapons in the hills, hidden as they are by score in the brush. Thus, one of the smallest nations in history darkens today under the shadow of tyranny. Italy has fallen to suffer Albania to kneel, but their suffering is the real strength of the Albanians. Will they rise and work together to forge them again into the light?